What if Plato were right? Plato, not the child's toy. What if, before we were born, some cosmic finger pressed into the clay of our being, right before our spirit leapt into our doughy flesh, an image of who we were meant to be? What the philosopher called the form of you or me in our most authentic selves. And what if part of life wasn't just to discover the world and claim and align ourselves with the forms of beauty and truth and goodness in the world and incarnate them here, but also to yearn and to stumble our way toward that self whose imprint we were meant to inhabit? What if? And doesn't it feel that way sometimes? That there is an authentic self that is calling us forward to inhabit it? Richard Rohr, the American Franciscan priest and writer, talks about the projects of the first and the second halves of life. If there are projects divided that way, surely one of the projects of this first half of life has to be this quest to find the self, that self. Doing so can be like the hero's journey, up against all sorts of challenges, like the barriers of culture and prejudice, or the limited sense of the possible that we inherit, or other people's desires to tie ourselves to what they want or need to feel safe or needed or whole. And for sure, for some of us, the barriers to this work will always be greater than for others. Next month, for the Ministers Book Group, which, as I've told you before, is my excuse to have people read a book with me so that I'm accountable to reading it, I've asked folks who want to join me to read a book that's about one of these journeys, a memoir with the striking title, Hijab Butch Blues. The book is written by Lamya H, a Muslim woman who immigrates from what is probably India or Pakistan to a wealthy Arab nation when she's young, where her parents think they will have more economic opportunities and can still raise their children Muslim. And then Lamya comes to the United States on a college scholarship and stays. Hers is a memoir about stumbling and wrestling her way to a life of greater and greater wholeness and authenticity. I hope you'll consider reading it. Part of what I love about the book is being reminded of those years when you and I, immersed in family and our own cultural surroundings, were beginning to feel the ways in which those surroundings, as good as they may have been, were constraining or containing our sense of the world and our place in it. I was reminded of the simple courage it's so often required of questioning and self-definition that happens in this time of life that we are all compelled to undertake in the journey to know and find ourselves. For Lamya, part of that journey is as someone for whom gender normative expressions feel too constraining. In her childhood, she could inhabit a world without too much conformity under the label of tomboy and the permission to be a child. But the world begins to exert its pressure at 11 when she gets her period and expectations about what it means to be a woman set in. Her mother buys her earrings, makes her wear a salwar kameez, which is a long kurta, and a dupatta that women wear in many countries, which makes it hard for her to play cricket with the boys. And she's told to befriend the girls in the neighborhood instead. It's always been like this between my mother and me, this struggle over the kind of daughter she wishes she had and the one she ended up with. Her longing hits a peak in the summer that I'm 13. Her uncle, my uncle, her brother, is getting married. And the family heads to their home country for a week of celebrations. It's here that an auntie asks Lamya if she can put some lipstick on her. And when Lamya very reluctantly agrees, after many polite refusals, figuring that that might be the easiest way out of this moment, it immediately becomes clear from a flurry of hands that come at her that this was a plan her mother and aunt hatched up to actually put a full face of makeup on her without her permission. When the chair whips around to the mirror to show her what they've done, after what seems like an eternity to her, they are delighted. She is not. Look, you're so pretty. But I have no idea who this person is that I am looking at. It's not me, it's some other person with my face, and I hate it. They've made me look 3 shades lighter than I usually am. They've made me look like a woman in ways that I don't feel. I feel so confused and disgusted by this person I see in the mirror that I start crying. I sob hard, sitting in front of that mirror in the air-conditioned room, surrounded by the women of my family who are all tisking, tisk, 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 and bemoaning my ungratefulness until my face is a mess, but I get to wash it off. The women around Lamya have no sense of the feeling of violation in this act of gendering, which for this young emerging woman is not who she feels comfortable being. And as hard as this moment is, it's also a moment of clarity in the journey. It doesn't help Lamya that in her journey, she is also coming to understand herself as queer. Like so many people, some maybe in this room, around the world, that truth can make self-revelation feel and be particularly dangerous and forbidden. And if you add to just that the fact that the faith that this woman also loves has also been interpreted as her having no place if she's queer, then it's particularly dangerous and fraught. But what I love about the author is that she's so devoted to her faith. And I wonder if other people have had this journey. She's such a fierce student of it. She's so trusting of it. She is so faithful in it that she doubles down to find a way to find and keep herself in it. She trusts that the God of her understanding will find her in the stories, and she pours her own experience through them, through passages and prayers, to find where she can exist in it. Which is to say that she is among the faithful of all ages who read sacred texts, finding the evidence in them for a God that is bigger than was imagined and enshrined for those who interpreted the text before them. And she finds that evidence. She takes note of her teachers who tell her that God is neither male or female, though traditional language and translations have made that hard to capture. The sacredness this points to of being beyond a single gender identity is powerful to name and hold, as it still is for so many of us. God, she writes, describes in divinity in 99 names in the Quran that expand language, that collide with the capacity of language. Al-Qadir, the one with most perfect power who does not make mistakes. Al-Shahid, the all-observing witness. And gender in all of them is nowhere, she writes, within these concepts that define the divine. The God who teaches us that we can be both and neither and all and beyond and capable of multiplicities and expansiveness. And never a mistake, like me. Lamya finds the story of Mary, called Maryam in the Quran, who in Islam is a woman who, because the stories can be told differently, as some of you may well know, who chooses, this Maryam, to live in the temple, serving God and away from men. Maryam, who God chooses to give birth to the prophet. And Lamya wonders, perhaps Maryam wasn't with men because she did not wish to be with men. And if so, maybe there were women like Lamya in the world always. And those women could still be sacred and beloved to God. And so the unfolding goes of figuring out who she feels called to be and wants to be, and asking the God of her understanding and her sacred texts to show her where there's room for her as she is. So her courage shows up, her faith steps up, and the final question is whether others will step up. Will other people challenge her choices, or will they make a space for our unfolding? When Lamya comes out, it all comes together in a story of how it ought to be, at least from my perspective. One summer, she's overseas in a program teaching students. It's run by her college. There are other friends there with her in the program, when she finally names for herself the feelings that she's been having and names this particular feeling she is finding it hard to control, which she can name as attraction, romantic attraction for another student. I hold these feelings, she writes, inside the contours of myself until one night I just can't, she writes, anymore. So she pulls aside a friend and they find a quiet place to talk. And in the moment, Lamya struggles to find the words. Finally, she says only, I think I kind of like someone. I figured that was it, Kara, her friend, says. And then Kara asks in succession about each of the boys on the program, and Lamya answers no after each boy is named. It isn't them. And then Lamya writes, I grow visibly tense. And then something passes across Kara's face, something very gentle. Is it a girl, she says, in a voice that strikes me as impressively nonchalant. I don't say anything. Later on, I'll remember my body shaking. Later on, I'll remember that I couldn't even look at Kara. In the moment, though, I feel like I'm somewhere outside and above my body, like the only thing keeping me tethered to this balcony are the thick soles of my flip-flops. I'm scared. All I have to say is one word. Yes, one word that will turn my feelings into something real, something tangible, something with a name. And yet, this one word is stuck in my throat. I don't say anything. I can't. Instead, I tremble. Caught on the brink, I pause. Lamya is tongue-tied in this moment, but she remembers someone else in her faith who was tongue-tied, Moses, who in the Quran, known by the name Musa, who in the Hebrew and Christian scriptures, in our versions of the stories, or the ones I grew up with in the Hebrew and Christian traditions, is known for his stuttering and his fear that he cannot lead when God asks him to. Do you remember this about him? And Musa, who nonetheless gathers his courage to do what God asks. When God tells him, go tell the Pharaoh to let the oppressed people go, Musa says a prayer that has become one of Lamya's most favorite. Musa says, "My Lord, expand for me my breast with confidence, and ease for me my task, and untie the knot from my tongue, that my speech may be understood." And in the story, Musa's prayer is answered, and the prophet can say what he must. And so Lamya says the prayer to herself in this moment. And then to her friend who is waiting quietly, nonchalantly, Lamya nods. "It is a girl," the nod says. What happens next isn't like the day of the makeup, no tisking and disappointment. Kara leaps in with affirmation, guessing immediately the girl and affirming that this is a good choice, and then going on to share her crush on a girl the year before and how surprising it was to her to feel that way. And Lamya is welcomed out into the world, helped by her faith, moved to do so by her own courage, given a safe place to land from her leap by this friend who made room for a fuller version of herself. We are all on this journey, aren't we, to deeper, more authentic self, always. A journey to find ourselves and our tribe and a faith that will make a place for us among the body of the sacred and beloved. And our job is to do our own work faithfully and courageously. And our job is to make the way easier for everyone else who is coming on that journey. To draw the circle wide and to draw the circle wider and to draw it wide, wide enough to welcome anybody home in this world. Because who knows who Ellen will be? But can we doubt it that who she is called to be will be beautiful if she is true to the spirit that is planted in the sacred gift of each child, the way it was planted in us? In the end, by the end of the book, Lamya is finding her way. Her desire to keep connection to her family is evident in the name she signs the book by, with which we only get a final initial for her last name. And the photo on the back book jacket, which has a woman in hijab turned almost completely away from the camera, unrecognizable. We all make our deals with the world around us and our evolving hearts as we must. The writer currently lives with her partner in New York, the sparse bio tells us. The journey continues. Martin Buber, the theologian famous for I, thou, you may recall, in his Tales of the Hasidim, tells the story of the great Hasidic Rabbi Zusia, who on his deathbed began to cry. Zusia says to his students who wonder why he cries that his fear is not that his God in the next world will ask him, "Why were you not Moses? Why were you not Abraham? But his fear is that God will ask him, "Why were you not Zusya?" What if Plato was right, and answering that question, yes, I was Zusya, was the sum of our work, and the only way to make the world whole? It's not impossible to imagine, is it? Blessings to all of us as we go. I love you. Amen.